And you mentioned earlier, like, people downplay math, but I would argue that we should all be better at math and learn math to its fullest capacity so we can really understand how everything else works. So what are your thoughts on, do you think math is just, numbers, or do you think it has a deeper meaning in our connection in the universe?
It definitely has a deeper meaning in our connection in the universe. I think when people say math, immediately what they think of is x plus 3 equals 7. They think of these equations that were taught in school.
Yeah.
It's not really just that. That's the academic mathematics. But what is mathematics? It's a language, and it's just a way to describe the world. So when we say it touches everything, it's because math is meant to be a way to see everything in the world. It's a way to describe rates of change. It's a way to describe, as you mentioned, geometry, shapes. When we're saying to meet at a particular time and day, that's using numbers and quantities for coordination, right? And it's again derived from an understanding of the world, of watching patterns and an observation, saying, okay, I can predict that the sun is going to rise in another 24 hours, and we're going to meet at that. You know what I'm saying? So I think that thought about what math is a lot of times gets lost just because we're so in that mindset of, oh, math is calculus. Do I need explicitly to take a derivative in my day-to-day life in the future? Maybe not, but everything else that is math, which is just describing the world in ways that other people can understand it, is constantly happening.
Yeah, it's like when I took like an online course, this Harvard course online last year, and then you learn about things like deductive logic and logic, and you realize like how, you learn pseudocode, for example. But like when I started to understand pseudocode, I'm like, well, this is life. Like pseudocode is life. Pseudocode is like a very specific to-do list. And if people really understood how to think like that, then they would probably kind of operate on a higher scale when they go about their day-to-day life. Because your emotional brain is we need that, right? That's what connects us on an emotional level. But our logical brain is what actually helps us build things. Like when I look at geometry and I think about, like, for example, the pyramids, like, people have a lot of thoughts and stuff about the pyramids, but like, I mean, it's interesting when you look at how structured the pyramids were, how they aligned with the stars, and how symmetrical they were. And you have to think, like, what were people connected to during that time period where they didn't have a lot of distractions? They didn't have things that were kind of distorting them. Those were mathematical geniuses. Whereas today, we're kind of like going backwards, where like we might, like, for example, you said people will downplay math, but it's like, well, if people were doing more with less.
Tremendously more, yeah. Well, at least when
if they were doing more with less, it's an interesting thing. It's something that where you really have to ask yourself, is math more than just, like you said, just equations? So.
And think about this. Think about your field, right? When you're working with people in striking or boxing, a lot of the communication you're carrying out for people to understand you, they have to have a little bit of knowledge of mathematics as a language. So like, hey, yeah, you see how you hit the pad right there? So we're not going for a power shot here. I want you to give me 50% the amount of power. Again, it's just thrown in there. But that's really at the heart of math. It's communication. Or, all right, so you notice how you're coming on straight on. I want you to angle off at 60 degrees. Now, you don't have to say 60 degrees. You could show the angle, the change in angle. But again, you're using angles, you're using positions. Now, we want this to come from the bottom, not the top. Those are mathematic descriptors as well. They're just not, maybe we don't necessarily see it in math class.
And it ties right in into my next question, which is, you work with math, I work with the body. How much of those two fields, how much are they related with one another? How much is it related to when you move your body and you take care of yourself physically? How does it tie into your work? How does it tie into your personal life? How does it tie do you share that advice with your students?
Oh, yes. So if you're talking about, so I can talk about this in two ways. One, I can talk about the similarities in terms of training fighting and training math. There's a lot of overlap there. But for me specifically, why is training so important to me? And that's both lifting weights as well as training martial arts. for me to be productive, I can talk about that as well. So you want me to talk about both of those?
Give it all.
Okay. So I've talked about this a lot with my MMA coach. The biggest similarity, I kind of touched on this earlier, between teaching martial arts and teaching math is, again, students feeling safe. They gotta feel safe. I remember at the beginning, 5 years ago when I first started training, he was hitting me very lightly when we're sparring, stuff like that. And then I said, hey, would it be better, like, are you hitting me lightly because you're afraid I'm gonna get hurt? Because if you think it's gonna be better for my training, even though it's you may not be, whatever, you might be worried about my safety, but if I'm gonna learn more quickly, go for it. Maybe we can ramp it up to 50%, whatever, power, whatnot. And he said, no, because the most important thing when you're learning right now is to feel safe. And if you don't feel safe, you can't be relaxed and you can't learn to your maximum capacity. And that's the exact same thing with math tutoring. Like, my students have to feel safe and comfortable. They have to trust me. Like I said, that I'm not going to judge them, etc. Now, when we're talking about the importance of physical fitness to do what I do, I work probably more than the vast majority of people, I would say. I mean, I always am working 7 days a week. I have a really busy tutoring schedule during the school year. Plus, I do all my social media myself. Plus, I manage a team of tutors as well. So I'm constantly doing stuff. I have a couple other YouTube channels. I have an MMA channel that I'm starting that's super fun. So I'm doing a lot of different things. There's no way I could be doing all these things without staying on top of my physical fitness, staying on top of my diet, my health, all that stuff. I'm 44, okay? And I know a lot of people, I feel better than I've ever felt, and that's because I'm
You don't look
super,
44.
yeah, like, people say that, but I'm super dialed
You look
in.
like a baby, man. Wow.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I'll take it as a compliment. But I'm super dialed in on the health and fitness side. That's why I can wake up every morning and have long days and do what I need to do. Sure, I'll have occasional dips in energy and whatnot, but it's so critical. I feel like if you want to be performing at a high level and just working your tail off and having a lot of fun and feeling good, to have a solid fitness routine, have a solid sleep routine, and have a solid diet.
Yeah. No, I mean, over the years working with so many different people, you realize how interrelated. I mean, now there's a lot of research that's showing taking care of yourself physically has so much mental health components to it. And obviously, if your mental health is compromised, then it's going to affect, how you interact with other people. I know me personally, I'm lucky enough to move around with people, but I know when I don't move, I'm cranky. It's almost like a hangry for me.
I'll tell you this too, just going back to what you're saying about working out, I'm so sensitive to it that if I try to go to the gym every day and do something, and if I miss a day, I'll miss a day occasionally, but I feel it. My sleep's messed up and I feel off. I almost get a little depressed.
Yeah.
I'm very sensitive to it.
Yeah, no, so I have some episodes talking about this. One of the things that I've realized since the pandemic is a weakening of people's willpower. And what I mean by that is, when I first started working out when I was a kid, I had a lot of emotions. I had a lot of things that, I was dealing with as a kid. And for me, it was always working out always helped, right? And what's also cool about that is you meet other people that are probably finding the same outlet like you. So then you start to create relationships with people off of working out, and then that aids to your to your mental health.
Yes.
So it's not isolating. I think where, what happened in the pandemic is that everybody got so isolated, right? Meaning, when you take the classes that I teach, the group fitness classes that I teach, there's a sense of community. There's a sense of that everybody's pushing themselves and you're there and you're wanting to push yourself. And then you walk out of there, not only because you moved your body by yourself, but you moved your body with 20 other people. And people, I noticed that, for obvious reasons, people were isolated, people wearing masks, people were on quarantine.